Welcome back to Humble Hardware. 2022 has been an amazing year for retro handhelds. We had the bite-sized Miyoo Mini, the AYN Odin, and the Anbernic RG353P to name a few. And now you can add another quality handheld to the list because I've been testing out the Retroid Pocket 3 for the past few weeks and I've been super impressed so far. In this video, I'm going to do a full review of the handheld, how good is the Pocket 3, and is this a contender for Retro Handheld of the Year? Let's find out. Remember guys, if you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell to get all my latest videos. The Retroid Pocket 3 has a Unisoc T310, which is a single-core A75 at 2 GHz and 3 A55 efficiency cores at 1.8 GHz. This means that it roughly sits between the Anbernic RG503, which had a quad-core 1.8 GHz processor, and the PowerKitty X18S, which had a dual-core A75 at 2 GHz and 6 A55 cores at 1.8 GHz. When it comes to processor power, it can do most PSP, Dreamcast titles and below pretty comfortably, but it'll start to struggle with Gamecube and anything above that, in my opinion. The Pocket 3 also comes in two memory configurations, 2GB of RAM at $119 and 3GB of RAM at $129, not including shipping. I don't think you'll have any problems with the 2GB version if you're using this for PSP, Dreamcast emulation and below. On PSP, Wipeout Pulse uses around 1.5GB of RAM. Wind Waker on MMJR uses around 1.8GB of RAM. The 3GB model would be suited for more recent Android games. That said, because there's only a $10 difference, the 3GB model would be the safer bet, and that's the one I got and using in this video. Both models come with 32GB of storage, which is 22GB free for actual use, and of course you can use a micro SD card and play your games off that. The Pocket 3 also has a 4000 mAh battery, which along with the processor and Android 11, I was able to get significant playtime in retro games. In my battery test, I was able to get 5.5 hours out of Wipeout Pulse, which I think is a great result for a portable of this size. Do note I've decided to change the battery test going forward to 2x resolution. Previous tests were carried out at 1x resolution, so results may be slightly worse at 2x for those handhelds. The design is very much a homage to the current Nintendo Switch Lite, though it's a fair bit smaller than the Lite. The D-pad is in line with the face buttons, which lends itself well to older retro titles. Below this are the analog sticks, which are pretty comfortable and not hard to reach. It's also got stacked shoulder buttons, which is much appreciated. They're clicky, but I personally don't mind that much. If you order in the first couple of months of release, Retroid will actually send you a set of conductive rubber face buttons for you to install yourself. The ones in the handheld are dome switches, which make the controls a little bit clicky. I haven't installed the buttons yet, but just playing around with them, they do have that tactile rubber feeling that feels much better. One aspect I don't like is the select and start button at the top of the handheld. I have no idea why it's there. They should have just put the buttons on the front of the device. It's a real struggle to reach over R1 to press them. Aside from that, on the top there is a micro HDMI out, though it's 720p only. There's also Bluetooth 5.0 if you wish to connect wireless controllers and play on a TV monitor. Beside the L1 button is the power button. On the left hand side there are volume buttons, and on the right hand side there's a home button. On the bottom is a TF card slot for micro SD cards, USB-C port for charging and data, and a headphone jack. When it comes to size, it's a little bit bigger than the PSP, which sports a 3.5-inch screen, while the Pocket 3 has a 4.7-inch screen. The Pocket 3 is a lot closer to the Vita, which has a 5-inch screen. The device it's trying to replicate, the Switch Lite, has a 5.5-inch screen and is a fair bit bigger. And here is an Anbernic Win 600, which has a 6-inch screen, and you can see this is almost another class of handheld altogether. Let's go back to the PSP though, because I think this is one of the best features of the Pocket 3, and that is the size of it makes it a really good PSP replacement. I've been playing with the Odin base for a while now, and while it's fantastic, the experience is a little bit different due to the larger screen. The Pocket 3 is a lot closer in size and replicates that PSP experience better. Also, most games can be played at 2x resolution and they look amazing. Not to mention that the new LCD is much better and less washed out than a screen from 20 years ago. Speaking of the screen, it is one of the best screens I've tested on a handheld this year. It has curiously the same specs as the iPhone 6 screen, a 4.7-inch 750 by 1334 resolution LCD. The colors are absolutely stunning. It's also a super bright display as well. I'm recording videos at 20% brightness because any brighter and the camera just can't handle it, but at 50% games look amazing. The viewing angles are some of the best as well. In short, you won't find a better screen on any $120 device right now. The handheld uses Android 11 and for me it's been running great, but I've just kept it really simple, downloading all my emulators from the Google Play Store and just loading the standalone emulators from the home screen. You could definitely run something like Launchbox to customize your front-end user experience. Let's talk about games, and we'll start off with RetroArch. This is Streets of Rage 2 with and without custom bezels, just so you can see older 4x3 games with vertical black bars. RetroArch should be fine for all your 16-bit and earlier games, and during my testing I found the Pocket 3 to be that perfect balance of a nice size screen, light, and very portable handheld. It's a great choice for anyone who wants to make this their main go-to device either for travel or lounging around at home. The Pocket 3 is also excellent for the next tier of games like Nintendo 64. Mario Kart 64 runs great, as does Cruising USA. Something like GoldenEye will still have slowdown, but that's how it runs on even stronger hardware. Sega Saturn was a surprise. The version of Yabe Sanshiro 2 that is already on the Pocket 3 can output at higher frame rates than the original. For example, with Panzer Dragoon, the original ran at 20 FPS and previously the emulated version also ran at 20 FPS. Well, now the emulator can output this at 60 FPS and the effect is that it's a lot smoother. Similarly, on Panzer Dragoon Spy, the output frame rate here is 60 FPS. Something like Guardian Heroes runs a lot smoother now as well, so I can wholeheartedly recommend this device for Saturn fans. Like Saturn, PlayStation also works great. I didn't have any problems here using DuckStation. I tested Gran Turismo 2 Arcade Mode, Need for Speed Hot Pursuit, Tekken 3, and Wipeout 3, and they all played really well. As I said before, you will get most of the PSP library with this processor, perhaps 85% running well, and 15% that run fine but not perfect. What that means is that it's going to play pretty much all of your 30 FPS titles well. It's also going to play some of the 60 FPS titles well too. Games like Ridge Racer and Tekken 6 play perfectly, but it's going to struggle with the more demanding ones like Wipeout Pulse and Siphon Filter, where they'll hover around 45 to 60 FPS. For something like God of War, it's going to vary between 30 to 45 FPS, but it'll still be quite playable. Also, a quick tip, you can reduce the resolution from 2x to 1x, which will help improve performance a little. With PSP, the Pocket 3 holds up favorably against other handhelds. On the Anbernic RG503, the performance is generally not as good, so most of the 30 FPS games will run fine, but it'll only play a couple of 60 FPS games like Soul Calibur Broken Destiny and Virtua Tennis World Tour. On the Powkiddy X18S, which has a stronger processor, you can play just about everything, and only the most demanding titles will have a bit of slowdown. I've done a full PSP analysis on the Retroid Pocket 3 with over 30 games tested, so make sure you go and check out that video. Dreamcast runs great. Dead or Alive 2, one of the more demanding games, runs smoothly, and I threw a number of games at this and gameplay seemed pretty good. On Gamecube, Legend of Zelda Wind Waker runs okay, a little slow but still pretty playable, but it gets pretty difficult to find games that run well. Only the easiest games work, so I think for a better Gamecube experience I'd recommend something like the Odin. I didn't spend that much time on the PS2 after the first impressions video. Most games ran into some serious slowdown. I suppose if you look out for some 2D games that are easy to emulate, you'll be able to find titles that work, but I wouldn't buy a Pocket 3 for PS2 emulation. I also found no problems with Moonlight streaming, though this is all going to depend on your Wi-Fi connection. The Wi-Fi antenna inside is pretty good too. I sit about 20 meters from the Wi-Fi source, and the Pocket 3 is still capable of maintaining decent speeds, better than other more expensive handhelds that I have.
What's on the menu today?
As you can probably tell, I didn't have too many complaints about this handheld. In fact, I think the only serious grumble I had was the select and start button location being where it was. And I suppose if I were nitpicking, I wish they put in the conductive rubber buttons, as those would clearly be better. A Unisoc T618 processor would have made this a powerhouse, but on the flip side, the T310 makes the price tag much more compelling, and it plays so much of the PSP and Dreamcast library, I can't really complain that much. What I like best of all is the size of the portable itself. The Pocket 3 is perfectly balanced between power, portability, and value. At the start of the review, I asked whether this was a contender for Handheld of the Year, and in my opinion, the Pocket 3 is the one to beat. That's it for this review. If you liked the video, make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.